So welcome to everybody who's just joined us, and welcome to this evening's symposium event. My name's Phil Crew, so I'm the chair of the BCS IT Leaders Forum. I'll get our four presenters, our other three presenters, to introduce themselves as we go along, just before they do their particular topics. But I want to personally say thank you for coming along to this symposium, and just to give you a brief idea of what it is that we're going to try and achieve tonight. So as you know, over the last number of years, we've been running events for you as members, and sometimes by you as members, but mostly through external speakers and particularly interested parties. At the conference that we organised last year, there was a couple of topics that came up at that conference. Sorry, it was early this year, time's flying. There was a couple of topics that came up at that, and one in particular that we wanted to try and dig into more so, mainly because we hadn't really gathered the strength of feeling amongst the membership about that particular topic, and that was around management methods, and you'll hear some more about that from our first speaker, who's going to lead us on that, David. But one of the things it prompted us was to think about how we go about making sure that we're running the right events for you as members, and also how we go about identifying what you would like to see at the annual conference, which is currently due in, I think, February 2022 for our next one. And with some work within the committee, particularly led by David, but kind of impacted by all of us, we came up with the idea of these symposiums, where we could ask you, our members, to kind of engage with some of the things that we're thinking about, and some of the things that you as members have proposed to us that we need to think about more. And what we want to do over the course of this symposium, and at the end of it, maybe future ones, is to identify topics that we think and you think are interesting, to develop what we can do about those topics, be that an event or a white paper or both. And in particular, is this something you want to talk about more widely at the conference? So during the evening and during the presentations, there'll be opportunities for you to feed back on these about what you think, ask questions, and if it's a topic that's of particular interest to you, to leave us some contact details so that we can get back in touch with you and start to discuss it a little bit further. And hopefully that will mean that as well as running topics that are of interest, and as they come up, we will also be able to run events and do white papers based on topics that you yourself are really interested in. I hope that's given the kind of slice of this evening and what we want to try and achieve. I don't really want to use any more time of me saying hello to everybody. What I want to do is kick the evening off so that we can start to get involved in the actual topics to hand. So it gives me pleasure to introduce David Miller. David is the Vice Chair of the IT Leaders Forum, and in particular, he's been working up the piece around the management methods that I referred to that had cropped up after the conference last year. So David, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Before I do that, there's an address down the bottom there, which, if you could make a note of it, it's ahaslides.com, OBL60. If you try to get that on your phone or browser, probably the phone, you can you'll be ready for what follows my presentation.
John Hall's put it in the chat, David.
Sorry?
John Hall's put the link in the chat if anybody wants to copy it.
Oh, good. Thank you. Excellent.
It might not be the right link in the chat, but I will certainly put the link that David has just pointed to now.
Thanks, John. Right. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll get on with the first of these presentations. Let me find the right one.
just while David's sharing that screen, I'll reiterate, if you want to navigate to that ahaslides.com/OBL60 that's in the chat, I'm going to fire up the Q&A now, so it gives you the ability to start to ask some pre-questions as we're going along. Thank you.
So the second URL is the correct one. It's going to ask you for your name, your organization, and your email address before you can access it. Sorry, David.
Okay, so if people could close their cameras, screens, please. John McCarthy and Shakib. Then I will try to kick this off.
Sorry, David, I don't understand what you want from me. I've turned off my video.
Good, okay. I'm trying to close the, oh, there we go, got it. Right, so this is the feedback from the working group that we formed following the conference last year. So the survey showed up a number of things. First of all, there were several remarks about the constant need to keep pace with change. And someone even suggested that perhaps now was the time to hit reset in our IT management methods, tool sets and skills. Now, whether it is or it isn't, we thought it would be worth setting up a working group to look at it, rather than undertake a rewrite of the methods, which we didn't feel we were qualified to do. We've tried to represent the IT leaders' views, or your views, of the digital principles that might guide any rewrite. So that's how we approach the topic. So the first of the 7 principles that we came up with was that we don't actually manage change in business technology, hence reflecting the comments that we were getting in the survey, but we respond to change. And service value and agility are the challenges, and technology, training, ideas, funding, and tech-savvy business leadership are the enablers. Now, there was a theme running through this that said, whatever happened to the hybrid manager, we were all expecting hybrid managers to emerge. And in some industries, they have, but by and large, they haven't. And there's still this big separation between business and technology people and skills and training, and even the language that they use, the two groups use. So in the future, I think the success is going to depend more on tech-savvy business leadership being present in organizations. The second of the principles suggests that managers are both inward and outward looking, or should be both inward and outward looking, simultaneously exploring and exploiting opportunities to support continuous transformational change. So this is the continuous thing again. Change is coming along constantly, and it's necessary to adapt to it. And we do that whilst maintaining the value, integrity, and security of both the tangible and the intangible business assets. So that's including the technical infrastructure and data and so on. The third of the 7 digital principles says that management methods and solutions and services must be suited to today's complex, multi-dimensional, dynamic, and sometimes dispersed world, and for a future world where a more immediate response is demanded. So things are getting more complex because there's more in the mix. It appears that change is taking place more frequently, but it's also more complicated because we have to separate some of these things. And it's multidimensional because we're dealing with internal people, we're dealing with external organizations, and quite often we've got external service providers. And it's dynamic. It's also sometimes quite ambiguous because there's so much going on, it isn't always clear what needs to be done. Fourth, management methods must be capable of handling multiple small parallel projects and processes rather than just large serial ones, but still within the context of an architecture, the architecture that reflects the real world business landscape. But even so, we must recognize that even that big picture can change quickly. So the point behind this is that if we can handle rather more small projects in parallel, then we reduce the risk, we increase the speed or the velocity with which we can bring these things up, and the cost is less. What we've tended to do in the past is aggregate requirements and then produce a big bang solution, and quite often they fail. On the fifth point, initiatives must be supported by a flexible, business-driven, lean budgeting process on a case-by-case basis, with rapid approvals, standard costing, clear accountabilities across the extended enterprise, contracts that incentivize the correct behavior of third-party suppliers and provide a marketplace with services and spare resource. So here we're looking at the finance and admin side of IT. We're saying that if we're going to be working more quickly, responding immediately to demand, as we're going to increasingly have to do in the future, then we need a much more flexible way of budgeting for this, and we need a very rapid approvals process. The sixth point is, even where everything is eventually automated, and that's the way we're heading, of course, then management must be clear where the specification comes from and how investment and delivery are controlled. That's risk, benefit, investment priorities, success criteria, etc., for the good of the business and the society. Even where it may not be possible to define or test requirements except at the runtime, as in the case of self-adaptive, self-managing systems or cognitive informatics. What we're saying is, regardless of how the specification comes together, if we're responding in an automated way, we need to know where that specification comes from, why we're doing it, and how we control it. And the last of these points is that the final arbiters of the adequacy of solutions and services and the management methods, including whether all needs are being met, are the business stakeholders themselves, right? So it's not us, it's not the methods we're using, it's the business. So that comes back to the beginning, the points that were made right at the start, I guess. So we see this as the starting point of the discussion. And the IT Leaders Forum wishes to further encourage debate on the topic because it's an important one. Clearly, well, we think it's one that quite a few people are exercised about. There's the summary slide. Those are all 7 points on one slide. If that helps, if you want to take a photograph of it or a screenshot of it. And I'm happy to take questions. So I'll try to answer them as best I can. Phil, would you like to bring your screen back?
Yep, I shall do that. Thank you, David. Let me just do that. There's no unanswered questions at the moment, as far as I can see. That's where we've got to at the moment. So if people are using AHA slides, by all means, key something in if you want to ask a question. If you're not and you want to ask a question, I suggest there's the other thing we can do is if you can make it known that you want to that you actually want to ask something, come off mute and can you leave the last slide up, please? There you go. Would it be useful, and this is John, would it be useful to people, respond maybe with a thumbs up or however, if we make these slides available on the IT Leaders Forum website, and therefore you can, certainly that last slide, which is the summary slide of the methods, and then that you can be, you can use that and have that available. Would that be a useful thing?
We're trying to encourage questions. I think having the source text would be very, very useful.
I think people are using the thumbs up function on Zoom as opposed to the AHA slides to agree with you, Phil.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm to be honest, I'm looking at both, so so that's fair enough. But I have seen a couple of thumbs up go on Zoom as to leave it, to put that, make that last slide available. What I suggest I do is, following this meeting, if during the meeting you want to send me an email address, or I will just send something out to the whole membership, I can make sure that these slides are, or a subset of the slides if necessary, are posted on the BCS IT Leaders Forum website and give you a link to them. In particular, David, I think the request was that final slide, the summary slide. John O'Sullivan, I can see your thumb is most certainly raised, so I'll make sure that happens.
John, you had your hand raised at one point. I don't know whether you want to ask the question on Zoom.
John Hall or John McCarthy or John?
Sorry, John O'Sullivan.
While John's composing himself, David, could you put up the last slide so we?
Yes, can.
We have something to base the questions on.
How's that? Can you see that?
Yep.
You said that here's a question for you, David, just to start things off. You said in one of 7, we don't manage change in business technology, we respond to it. Is that entirely true?
Well, the change can be a change in technology, in which case we're looking at how we can exploit it within the business. The change could be a change in the business environment, competitive environment, or the fiscal environment, the economy. It could be a change to a new competitor, a new way of doing business, a new channel to market that's opened that we're not exploiting. So it could be all manner of things. The question is then, what do we do and how do we deal with it? So that's the point of the statement.
But are we not franchisers within the organization as well? Do we not? Are we not the innovators, the change drivers within the organization as well? Are we not providing the services that allows the organization to make the next step? In which case, we're doing more than just reacting to change. We might be responding to change in the environment, might be introducing new products, but within the organization, we're also driving change.
But it's probably new technology that's driving that, isn't it? It's something new that's driving it. The
technology by itself doesn't drive anything. It's technology within a social context, and introducing that technology into an organization changes the context of the organization. But anyway, I mean,
but you can't do it until it's available, until it becomes available. And so it's when it emerges as a viable technology that you think, this is something that I could be doing within my organization. Or alternatively, it's something that a competitor introduces before you do, and it starts to disrupt the market, and you have to respond because somebody else is using it. But quite often it's an external change that's taking place that causes us to have to respond. Otherwise, you'd have long periods where there was a kind of an equilibrium. And we do talk about managing change, and dangerously, we also talk about managing expectation, which can be even more worrying. But we don't really manage change. We manage the introduction of technology that's emerging, or we respond to things that are external to the business, or pressures within the business. Money's running out, and so we have to find a more efficient way of working.
I'm going to say more about this later. So,
okay. But the second point is managers are both inward and outward looking. So yes, to a point, but it's also some innovation as well taking place, and we're looking at how the technology can be exploited within the business as it is.
So I think, David, there was I noticed, and again, it was John O'Sullivan has posted a couple of things in the chat. I'll just read them out so that we can engage with them. The first thing is, I think we can sometimes respond, e.g. by anticipating, avoiding if the change is averse, preempting, etc. And also, I think, and a really valid comment here, leaders should be change agents. Sometimes I would even say change agents isn't going far enough. a change agent should be somebody who's facilitating the change. I agree with that. But often we should be the ones that are kind of strategizing, driving, anticipating the change, trying to make sure that people are engaging with what the change is and what the change means.
Yeah, certainly. Anticipation is a whole different area, and I think there's a lot more to be said about that. And if John or anyone else, John Sullivan, sorry, or anyone else wants to engage with this working group, we are keen to expand it and do more work on it. So if you do want to put your name forward, it's not very time consuming. We try to meet obviously using Zoom, and we don't have many meetings. We try to make them as productive as possible. So we're not asking for a lot of your time. We just want your ideas and input to this so that we can develop it.
Edmund, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to come off mute and say something, or do you want to type something? I'll read it out. Edmund Burton, I can see your hand raised. I don't know whether Edmund's having some trouble while he rectifies that. Yes, I think I would reiterate what David said. If anybody finds this topic particularly interesting and something that they want to engage with, it's not an onerous thing to kind of be just part of the group and putting some ideas in along with a few others that David's got. So I'd encourage you to put your name forward. That would be really helpful. The other thing I'd say, sorry, John, I interrupted. The other thing I'd say is if you are on the AHA slides, or AHA slides, however you pronounce it, there will be an opportunity for you to kind of say, yes, please involve me during the topics. So, sorry, John, I interrupted you?
No, it's Edmund. I'm now unmuted. It needed to be unmuted from the centre. It wouldn't allow me to do it.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Anyway, Edmund, go ahead.
Thank you. A useful set of principles, and I'd like to study them and see if I can add any value. I wanted to highlight the issue of requirements, and just to highlight the importance of having a discipline around who can change requirements in terms of performance, time and cost. And of course, the ultimate is who has the authority to approve and accept the product as fit for service. So interested to hear your thoughts about requirements capture, how you prevent requirements creep, and ultimately accept as being fit for use.
So was that a question, Edmund?
Well, I was interested in your reaction to how the manager leader controls requirements, prevents them from creeping just because it's possible to enhance the performance of a system, and who ultimately accepts it as being fit for use at the end, the acceptance process.
Well, I think in terms of funding the work, then clearly that's a senior management responsibility. It's a business role, isn't it? So it's a governance process. So budget approval. In terms of acceptance of the final product, I think lots of people will have an opinion. The project owner is going to sign it off. But if there are lots of people in the business who are very unhappy about what's being produced, you'll hear a lot about it. So, you know, it's a bit like politics in a way. You know, someone takes the responsibility, but there's ultimately a day of reckoning when people's opinion holds sway. So you can't ignore the voice of the business, the voices of the business. And the path you tread depends very much on the circumstances and the project and how sensitive it is and so on and so forth, and how many people are voicing disapproval, if that's the case. But generally speaking, it's not so black and white, is it? Generally speaking, the people that speak up against something that's been done are those who would have liked to have seen something else incorporated into the solution. And that then becomes a new requirement, which goes through a process. So it's a continuous improvement process. And the more that there's continuous change, because it's becoming more complicated, there are more players in most businesses, internal and external, the more complex it becomes and the more change is taking place. More demands are being placed upon IT. And it's these demands and the continuous nature of it that means that we don't have the luxury of taking things slowly, step by step, and doing things always doing things in a totally disciplined manner. So I understand what you're saying. Does that answer your question?
Well, it's interesting, and the dilemma is it not, that in a context of continuous change, which is the point you opened up with at the beginning of your address, we can't have anarchic implementation of changes without a control approach principle. And I believe that it has to rest ultimately in the hands of an individual who is not only answerable for the performance, but also the time and the cost of the program. And as a lifelong user sponsor, I've seen the corpses of major IT programs or hardware programs that have had a lot of technology in them, which have not been properly disciplined and have cost the taxpayer a fortune. So I don't have a solution to that apart from the importance of having a responsible owner. But I'm interested in hearing an engineering response to my comments.
I don't know if anybody's particular. John, you've got your hand up, John Hall.
I'm going to say more about, I really like the tack that you're taking, Stephen. Sorry, John. No, sorry, who was the questioner?
Edmund.
Edmund, apologies, Edmund. Sorry, it scrolled off the top of my screen. I really like the question. I think there is, one could question the premise of controlling requirements. Controlling requirements within an organization, the scope creep within an organization, doing something because you can do it. Yeah, that's incredibly important. It can be wasteful of resources. It can be, it can lead you in places that the organization doesn't want to go, but also it can put you in direct contrast with the world outside of you, with your business environment. You're drifting in one direction. There's drift in the business environment, and those two things diverge very easily and stay divergent very easily. So responding to what we might call environmental drift, the tendency of the environment, the tendency of changes to originate in the environment, I think is a healthy thing for an organization to do. And if that comes through the requirements, then those requirements must be factored into the processes that lead to products and services. If the change comes from internally, there is a reason to stop it. But if it comes externally, I can't see any reason why we would want to stop it. That's not so much of an engineering view. I think engineering is almost a greenfield thing. We're building a new product, we're putting out into a new market. What organizations are currently dealing with is sort of a brownfield situation where they're trying to react to what's happening in the system of systems of which they are a part. And I think engineering has problems dealing with systems of systems engineering, whereas this more reactive, more adaptive organization is much better placed to fit within that system of systems and to benefit from the change in the environment, and even to use that as a competitive advantage over their other organizations.
Yeah, I think if I can try to balance that up a little bit. I think what we were recognizing in putting these together was that the world is changing. It's different to what it was even 10 years ago. The 7 principles, if you like, kind of reflect everything that's been said this evening, because the 6th of these is very much about control. The first and the second, if you like, are more entrepreneurial. But for any given organization, there's going to have to be a balance. They're going to have, that any organization is going to have to decide what the balance is between control and entrepreneurialism. How free is the organization going to be to respond and react? Or how controlled does it have to be? And Edmund, if you're in the public sector, then you will probably err on the control side to a greater extent than people who are in the private sector, I would suggest. But all sectors are different and all industries are different. So the question arises, where do you position yourself on that matrix?
Yes, I'm advocating a dialogue between those who know what is required by the business or the operation and those who know what's technically possible. And that's got to be a structured discussion, or you can end up with the requirements just running out of control.
Yeah, or opened up to opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I think, thanks, Edmund. I think Stephen Castell also typed in across 2 or 3 messages a question. I'm going to try and read it out here. You can probably see it. I've shared it on the screen. So where does this fit in with the digital principles? Responsibility and the management of that responsibility to establish and maintain processes, standards, and independence for professionalism. Governance, quality, and fitness for purpose, including monitoring such things as bias and ethics in defining requirement specification. And then it also added awareness of and assuring compliance with wide and widening legal responsibilities and liabilities. And Stephen, I got the apologies for the wordiness, but I think there's a thing there around responsibility for standards, and in particular you're talking around obviously the BCS standards of professionalism and so on, but also fitness for purpose, quality, legal, and so on. There's quite a few things kicking around in there. I'm really not sure we've got the time to answer that one fully, but I'll let David, if you've got any comment at all on that one. I suspect that might be one, Stephen, where if you want to kind of join in a meeting to discuss these kind of things, I think that would be an interesting topic to take forward. What do you think, David?
Well, yeah, I think that and Edmund's are both valid points to build into this. If you look at those 7 digital principles, much of what you're asking for, Stephen, is there, though not in the detail that you're asking for it at the moment. So I'll be very happy for you to make a contribution, and you, Edmund, as well, because I think both of these are valid views. Question is, how much do you put into a principle? We don't want hundreds of these things. We want to try to capture the essence of what we're trying to do in as few words as possible. We're not actually building the methods. What we're doing is trying to build a framework which suggests that the methods we need don't yet exist, which I think most people are feeling, certainly those that have been involved so far. So we're very happy to open this up, get more involvement from anyone that wants to get involved. And certainly the topics that are raised this evening are important ones, and we would like to incorporate them.
So as you can see, I've moved on. For those of you that are on the slides, you will now hopefully be able to see some way of inputting, just using words or phrases, what you think the importance of this topic is to you particularly. And what we want to do, as David said, is start to build on this initial discussion, make sure it's focused in the right areas, and make sure we're asking the right people to do the next steps. So if you want to type in some words, we'll see some of those completely anonymously, as you can see, pop up and give us a view. So we've got guidance up there at the moment.
Not clear how I type in.
Sorry, say that one again.
I'm not clear how I type in on this. Which particular part of my screenshot will this be?
Are you on the ahaslides.com site as from your web browser? So there's the Zoom call, and then there's the ahaslides.com. Now, if
right.
you're on that site and you've keyed in your information, you should currently be seeing a screen with some empty boxes in it, with the topic heading as use some words to describe the importance of this topic to you. It is just a case of keying some words in there. So if I do that, if you can still see my screen, that should be the screen you're seeing.
And I just type in?
Just type in, where it's enter a word, just type in a word or a phrase. Yeah. When you're done, hit submit. You can enter some, you can hit submit, you can then put some more in if you want. There's no limitation. But we've got about 4 of these just as a thing, and then what we'll do is any final Q&A, and then I'll pass over to John to take us into the next section of the evening, which will be talking about cybersecurity. But I don't know if you've managed to type anything in. I'm about to move on to the next question. Next question is just, in your opinion, is this suitable for discussion at the IT Leaders Conference? Is this the kind of thing you'd like to see us talk about at the conference? Straight yes, no answer on this one. And I'm seeing some things come through on the chat as well. So I'll absolutely transcribe that. I'll move on to the next slide. This is completely anonymous. Nothing will appear on the screen or be shared. But if you want to leave an email address and your name on this slide, then absolutely we'll be able to get back in touch with you if you want to be more involved in this going forward. So at the moment, I know the 3 people that were really taking part in the conversation were Stephen, Edmund, and John O'Sullivan. So if you want to be more involved, either in the Zoom chat, just put yes, or if you're on the slides, just fill in your name and email address, and we'll get back to you from that. And the last slide, the last question is, again, just multiple words that you can key in, but how can this topic be improved? If there were things, I've obviously picked up the things that were questioned, and I'm assuming that when we correlate that, there'll be one or two things in there that some of the questions might be an area for improvement or anything like that. But if there's anything else that you think we've not talked about, something that you personally will be you personally are affected by or interested in, and you would like it to be developed to include that as a topic area, by all means, fill it in. And lastly, back to if there's any questions that you feel you've not asked yet, not had the opportunity to ask, please key them in, and we'll capture those, and we will make sure they get answered. Now that's the format that we'll go through after each one of the next sessions. So effectively, just asking for what do you think this means to you, whether you think it's a subject worth further discussion. Are you in particular interested in knowing more about it, taking part in it, anything like that? And finally, how do you think the topic could be improved? So you'll see those same 4 slides popping up at the end of each of the sections. If there's no questions, I'll say thank you ever so much, David. I'll forward anything to you, and I suspect what we'll do is we'll make a note of all of the comms that's also been going on in the Zoom chat, and just make sure we've got that captured, as well as what people have entered into here. And with that, I'll say we'll hand over next to Dr. John McCarthy. John is within the IT Leaders Forum, our cyber person. He's obviously been very involved in cyber for a long time. John, I'll hand over to you to guide us through the next. If you want to just give a couple of sentences so that people who don't know you feel as if they kind of know you a little better.
Are you sure you want that?
I'll not be the judge of that. We'll have a vote on that later on. Yeah.
Okay. Let me just see if I can share my slide like that. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Or can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Good. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's symposium. I don't know if it's going to crash our bandwidth, but how about some cameras? Why don't we say hello to each other? Anybody willing to put their camera on and say hello? John Hall is there. Hello, John. Phil's there. I see my old friend Ben Booth is floating around somewhere. So it'd be nice to say hello to him. Anyone else want to say hello? We're all shy. Don't blame you.
It's these bandwidth problems.
I agree. I agree. So what I'm going to be talking about for the next 20 minutes or so, or effectively what we're going to be talking about, is how can IT leaders beat the criminals? And I'll give you some context and some background in relation to that. We are aware that online crime is the fastest growing area of criminal activity. It's when the UK started publishing the stats for this, and they included cybercrime, it went to #1 instantly. So we are now, cybercrime is a big industry and big business. Criminals have been very quick to adopt cybercrime and to take advantage of this in the new digital economy. And I think one of the great challenges that perhaps we're going to highlight and look at is the way that criminals are taking advantage of how to exploit this particular elements, but legal boundaries, national boundaries have yet to catch up with the digital environment. And that makes it very hard to actually chase up and prosecute these people, just on the sheer practicality of going through multinational states. Many users of the internet are aware of the dangers but do not know how to use the internet safely and how to mitigate these threats. I would lay money, and I'm not a gambling man, that all of you people who are on this call tonight are probably the agony aunt or uncle for your families and friends in relation to what's happening in the world of how do I do this on my computer? Because once they identify you as that, then they know, and they'll probably come to you and ask you about some of these dangers. I certainly get requests from my family in relation to phishing emails. You know, is this all right? Shall I click on this? You know, the usual, so on and so forth. But the real problem that we're faced is that there's been lots of advice out there. In fact, there's probably too much advice. We've been inundated with various different campaigns and so on. But the problem that I see is that how do we actually get it to the people who are the most vulnerable? We can't use an internet campaign, because obviously if you use an internet campaign, they'll be familiar enough to do this. But what I really want you to kind of consider is, and get involved in this debate, is that as senior leaders in the world of IT, sitting there at the with our big, vast systems that sit out there and our complex corporate networks, is do we have a unique perspective on the problem? What advice would you give to people in that situation? How do we reach those users? And it's an interesting point that I was trying to raise earlier, in the fact that it would probably be not appropriate to use the internet to educate or to reach these people because it's not their natural medium. How can we legislate for a global problem inside a national boundary? You know, it's really difficult. Do we need higher levels of cooperation? Has Brexit had an impact on the way in which the UK is now looking at cybercrime? What about the fact that you may have seen recently that there's been there's an email address that you can now report a phishing email to, and that's just been launched by the National Cybersecurity Centre. But that's one of the first times that people have actually had a direct point of reference. If you are a victim of cybercrime, can you go to your local police station? Yes. Will they have the facilities and capability to manage that? They are incredibly under-resourced. They don't have the necessary levels of skill within those staff to be able to manage that. So it's a real challenge. But where do users go in order to be able to highlight the problems and issues concerned? And of course, silver surfers. Those I just picked a group of people that I thought would be particularly vulnerable in relation to this, so that we can see there are different segmented groups that we need to talk about. So I'd like to get your views on that. I'd like to see how you would set about trying to look at some of the step changes that we could implement in relation to that. I'm sure, as David Miller pointed out earlier, that you've probably had ransomware attacks, certainly from a business perspective, or your networks may be hijacked for crypto mining or so on and so forth. So as well as what the points I've raised, it'd be very interesting to hear about your personal experiences from a corporate environment in relation to that crime. Or what about people actually committing these sorts of crimes inside your corporate environment? So are they stalking people? Are they harassing people? Are they trolling? Or there could be a whole pile of stuff that's going on inside your network that you could be unfamiliar with. And on that basis, how do you strike a balance between giving people the privacy that they deserve and the empowerment and the trust that they have, as opposed to policing them so vigorously that they couldn't possibly commit these sorts of crimes? And those are challenges that we all face on a daily basis when we're looking at both the ethics and management of this thing in our corporate environments. And then finally, I'd like to bring on some issues in relation to fake news, and how can we actually be confident and know that the websites that we've seen are the real ones, and that the news that we're being delivered is effective or is in fact truthful. So I see Jill's put a camera on. I don't know if Jill's there to say hello. Good evening, Jill. Was that because you wanted to make a comment? Do you need to unmute to do that? Yes. Hi, Jill.
It's not because I have at this moment a comment. Hello.
Hi, Stephen.
it's because there was an invitation earlier on, and Tanya and I both found that it was blocked by host. And so we've been having a background discussion with Phil, and he has unblocked it. So I decided to take advantage of his gracious unblocking and actually come on video. So,
and that's marvellous. And it's a great pleasure to see you, Jill, and you, John O'Sullivan. You are now with us, and we saw Stephen. Phil, have all those problems been resolved now? Can people unmute themselves if they wish?
Yes, they can unmute and they can share video if they wish.
Okay, so I'm seeing a plethora of famous faces appear on my screen at the moment. That would be a slight exaggeration, but there are plenty of faces that are appearing. I can see Tanya, Edmund, Philip Virgo. Good evening, Philip. How are you? I know that you've been quite involved in this sort of work. I don't know if you've got any comments to make in relation to how we, as IT leaders, we could tackle cybercrime, but the floor is open to all of you to engage in this debate. Anyone like to kick us off?
Neighbourhood Watch, it's Philip Virgo here. Neighbourhood Watch have just relaunched their website. Supposedly they have 900,000 people on their email alert system.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Anyone here remember a Neighbourhood Watch? 1, 2, 3. Oh, you all live in nice houses then. Excuse my sense of humour. What about?
It's probably more of this tech gear we're trying to protect than we keep houses.
Good evening, Simon. How are you? What I'd like to
offer.
Yes, please do. Yes.
I think it would be helpful, and it may be that NCSC is already on top of this, to identify what organisations would be sympathetic to being active allies in this national initiative. As you know, there is a well-established youth approach to this in the Northwest, and that includes uniformed youth organisations as well. And I guess there's communities of retired users who would be instinctively sympathetic. Now, is any government body formally approaching groups and groups of groups?
Interesting point. Is anyone, I mean, I'm aware of some of this in my area. I'm a member of the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists, and we are looking to support other charities and so on in relation to that. But that's not the large scale approach that you're discussing there. But certainly with the formation of the NCSC and their public facing attitude, we've certainly got a greater opportunity for people to focus at a single point of contact. And I think that's been beneficial. Anyone been a victim of cybercrime? Put your hands up, you've been a victim of cybercrime. Nobody.
I've had
1, 2.
I mean, I've had several approaches that were obviously attempts at cybercrime, and I let them go on and on and on until they asked for access to all sorts of passwords, on which I said, actually, no, I was just testing you out. Bye. There's a lot of it about. But I mean, I wonder about your tack, John, in that, yes, individuals can do a lot to protect themselves. But there are so many tales of people who have been approached by really plausible sounding organizations that turn out to be shadow organizations, you know, hijacking a website or replicating almost a website. I'm wondering how much we can actually assume that individuals can actually keep track of this, and whether, you know, more regulation isn't actually, you know, what is needed here, rather than pushing it back, because, you know, you and I can maybe take care of ourselves. So, you know, until we're done, we don't know whether we are actually proof against it. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, I'm quite technical, so I've managed to breach major critical national infrastructures in the UK on a hacking basis. So, and I had permission I wasn't just wildly running around doing these sorts of things. So I've got experience from a technical perspective, but I would say, honestly, the most effective way to hack any organization or an individual is to say the following: what is your password? And people will still do that. And that basic cyber hygiene is still not there. And I don't see it in the workplace, and I don't see it in individuals, perhaps less out from in the workplace where we got some kind of cyber awareness training. But it's really, for me, a matter of looking at how we can bring that cyber awareness training. I personally put it into infant schools. I would, I would see it as in the same way, and I would put it as the induction pack for all employees, as opposed to press click, and you pass the acceptable use policy, and now you can use the IT equipment. I'd like it to be a little bit more engaged than that. Sorry for talking over you, Jill. Did you have a point you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, I developed a really highly secure system for the Treasury way back.
Okay.
And it all depended on having thumbprints and badge readers in the actual terminal that was being used. Okay. So after about 6 months of delivering it, went to see them and talked to the guy who was leading the team. And so we walked off for lunch, and he left his badge reader in the machine.
There you go.
So
that's the equivalent of what's your password, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah. So I'm sort of agreeing with you that it's sort of endemic, but I mean, I don't think that, and maybe I just looking at this from the outside, some of these big, global attacks, are they actually able to get started because of somebody leaking a password? I don't know. What's the sort of analysis behind this? I'm thinking of the things.
I mean, on a global perspective, when you're dealing with governments, you're always going to have nation states with highly sophisticated weaponry that can point at these things. But I would also argue that for the millions of SMEs in this country that have an outdated and non-updated server sitting in a dusty cupboard somewhere, that you spread a virus through that, and you could leapfrog through, you could bring down many businesses in the UK that would have a direct impact on our national economy, and yet none of them would be a part of a national infrastructure.
Peace. Absolutely. Peace.
So it could work, it could work just that way. Because somebody giving you a password onto one, you can then start pivoting and leapfrogging through on those networks. There's no question that that people are capable of doing that. Most ransomware is now going for these smaller firms, isn't it? The veterinary surgeons, the practices where they know that £300 or £400 is the price they're going to have to pay to get the IT guy in to fix it. So it's cheaper to pay them and quicker to pay the ransomware, get the key, and then not have to go through all that process again. However, I do not recommend that course of action, but there are many that do. It's a highly profitable business. Criminal activity is the word I'm looking for, not business. Apologies.
And John, while I would agree with you that often the most simple approach is probably the easiest one from a hacker's perspective, to crack an organization. I think a lot of criminal enterprises are now looking at the more complex social engineering approaches, especially when it comes to getting into financial organizations, such as the clients I work with, getting sources of data from an individual user's profile. Basically they track my Facebook, they track my LinkedIn, they track what my children are doing and everything else, so they can actually physically attack me, not directly but indirectly. That seems to be becoming much more common now than it ever was before, because I might wonder how I've been hacked, and actually somebody's just watched my activities for 3 or 4 or 5 days or even weeks or months to get what they need. And that's becoming the value of the hack is it makes that investment of time very much worthwhile. Now it's incredibly difficult to defend against that. And that's becoming, I guess, from nation state actors and even large criminal enterprises, that seems to be becoming a common thread of attack. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Have you heard of programs like Maltego? Yes. Right. Okay. So you know about how that uses data gathering techniques to piece piecemeal information together and so on. So there are my concerns, where I see a big danger is not large criminal organizations, but individuals who perhaps come from a country where they were well educated, the economy's collapsed, they've got the resources because they've got an internet connection and the availability to be able to offer their services hacking as a service. And now you can very simply go on the web and hire someone and they will simply go in and do the hack for you. You no longer need to have those necessary skills. You can pay someone a couple of $100 and they will do that for you. Very, very simple. I've seen chat rooms where somebody said they'll put child pornography on any computer of your choice for $150. You know, it was that simple. Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it, John? I mean, that really is. We've got to a point where we always knew it was a business, but we've got to a point where the business is undercutting itself in a race to the bottom.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I mean, and the problem, of course, with spam and phishing emails is that they actually work. You know, I mean, if you go to any, if you look at the amount of spam that's sent out to you, it's because it works. It's because it's really efficient and it does well in what it's setting out to do. And are any of you familiar? That's a nice cat, Jill. Are any of you familiar with the Black Hat conferences?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I spoke at the Black Hat in Vegas, the one before lockdown when people actually went there, and it's amazing how many people go there and stand up and say, "You can't hack me." I mean, I have no idea why these people say this, because within 3 months their lives ruined. But it invariably always comes down to a phishing email, to something that they've clicked. So for all of their sophistication and for all of what happens, you know, Simon, to come back to your point, social engineering is still the most powerful method to gain access to networks and to achieve criminal activity on the internet. It still comes down to how that human works. So within your organizations, do you have any particular ways of mitigating these sorts of things? Do you have training involved in this, or any of you involved in this area?
I think one of the only ones that I've seen to be successful is just ongoing training.
Yes.
An ongoing training and ongoing awareness raising, and it's just putting it in people's faces the whole time, just like the government's done with COVID awareness and wearing masks and washing hands. Within the organisations I work in, it's in all of the canteen and break areas. It's in the elevators. It's just everywhere, and it just causes, you know, basically it's in your face. So, and I think that's the only thing that draws people's attention to it all of the time.
I think so, and it has to be constant because we have a very short-term memory, right? It's, you know, we will say you don't allow tailgating. It's a terrible thing, and then somebody will open the door for an attractive male or female. You know, it's just what we're programmed to do. My favourite one, by the way, Simon, is the fishing pie that I see in the canteen on a Friday, and they put it up on the menu board and spell it with a PH, and then everybody goes along and says that's spelt wrong, and that's a really good way of raising awareness about phishing. So, but you know, there are lots of little tips and tricks we can do to that, but it's, you know, it can almost be overbearing. But I tend to use a lot of examples from World War II. You remember the walls have ears?
Yep.
And loose lip sink ships and that sort of thing. That was a very good awareness campaign.
I was going to say I don't remember it personally, but I'm aware of those campaigns.
Neither do I.
I think there are some new and emerging threats, and I guess they're not so new, but we haven't spoken about them in this forum. But certainly some of the social chat forums, such as WeChat, such as well, any of the SMS type platforms, they're becoming more and more prevalent in terms of phishing. Some call it schmishing, or and there's other ishing acronyms that are used, but I think certainly from a social engineering perspective, those chat platforms are becoming much more relevant for hacking, because people, for some reason, it seems that people, especially the Silver Surfer generation, have a lot more trust in those platforms than they necessarily would the bare internet. And I think that, again, that comes down to education.
But I mean, it used to be the joke, wasn't it? I read it in a book, so it's true. So if you then take that and put that on the internet, to some people, that's a generation of people who believe it's in print, it's true. They don't actually question it at any deeper level than that. And that can cause a lot of problems. Thank you, Philip. Philip's just pasted up some stuff from Our Watch. Below that, can you scroll down a bit? I can't see the next.
Yeah, sure. So
EasyJet hack. Ah, yes, I remember this well. I'm in the aviation security industry. Who I can't see who.
So Stephen Castell has sent his apologies. He's had to drop off, but he posted that. So I thought I'd make it there put it there for everybody. And James McFarlane also asked a really interesting question. What I want to do now, by the way, because I want James's question, I think, is an interesting one, because that's actually asking for what would you do, John? But I think what I'm going to do whilst you're answering that is I'm going to continue to move us through the kind of questions that I've been posing, which is, what does this mean to you, and are you interested in joining us, and should this be a conference topic? Please feel free to carry on the conversation, but also if you want to actually make a statement or send me a yes, I'd like to be interested in this, I'll start to gather that while you're continuing talking, John.
Yeah, I think James, great question. Is James still with us, or is he gone? I can't work out. Yeah,
he's still with us. Yeah, I can see him on.
Good. I can't find him. It's one of those things where I'm looking fiercely, and of course I can't see it.
So we're using, on the participants, we're using a funky new method called alphabetical order, John. So he's sort of between Irene Doherty and Joey Kay on my list anyway.
One of the principal foundations of the IT Leaders Forum is that support and conviviality that we'll have between each other. So I'd just like to thank Phil for that. But I would also like to come back to James's question here and say, if you have a good reason to believe an entity specifically targeting you as a state actor, what tactical response might you suggest? Okay, well, this brings back my saying. I have my own little saying, and that is that the only protection you've got on the internet is you're not important enough. So if a state actor wants you, it's game over. If they want to get to you, in fact, if most cyber criminals actually want to get to you, it's game over. I would switch it off. I don't think there is any protection. It is a matter of time before somebody will get near you and find a way to get near you and either infiltrate your network to gain the information necessary, or to be able to breach your computer systems and gain that themselves. It's the same as your house. How many of you here have got a burglar-proof house? None of us. Well, I hope not. I think Philip's raised his hand, but he's got a castle in Scotland. But for most of us, we haven't. And that is that we take the judgment risk, don't we? We look at the value of what we've got in our properties, and we look at how many locks we have on our front doors and societal rules and all of these sorts of things, and we make a decision based on that classic risk-based assessment that we do in the world of security applies to our own homes as it does to anything else. So therefore, if you're going to get somebody who's going to come along and say, well, I'm going to get a bulldozer and run over your house, or a Sherman tank, there's nothing you can do about it. Eventually these people will breach your network and will succeed. What I will question is, I don't see why they would do that. I don't see why a nation state would actually target a specific individual unless they're part of critical national infrastructure, perhaps, or they've got some very specific knowledge that they may have. And then I suspect that others may well be looking after them as much as they don't have to look after themselves. So I hope that gives some kind of answer to that question. So guys, do you want to do this for next year's IT Leaders Forum? I'd like to run this as more of a kind of like a debate and get you more involved in this. So like a round table, so we could come up with some ideas and stuff. I find it a fascinating subject. If anybody wanted to speak, we could speak together, or we could speak in turn, or any of these sorts of things. What about you, Simon? You seem nicely on this topic. Would you be interested?
Yeah, if I could find something interesting to talk about, John.
We'll find something interesting to talk about. You just drop your email in the thing and I'll be in touch and we'll sort it. Yeah.
I can't add my email to Zoom because of the connection I'm on, so I'll put it on AHA to Phil.
Perfect. That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, perfect.
And then that we can have a chat. But if anybody wants to get involved in any form of working group in or around this, as I say, I've got quite a few projects that I'm setting up on a non-commercial basis to help in the communities as part of what I do. But naturally, I also do it on a commercial basis because that's my kind of day job. So I'm always interested to hear other people's points of view, to look at it from other people's perspectives, to see what happens. Do we please submit your names and email addresses? How can this topic be improved? Probably with a new speaker would be a good start. You might want to get someone like Simon involved, or Philip, or whatever. Philip Virgo, I mean, they would be ideal as opposed to me. But do you have any suggestions? Anybody? It's very interesting to look at this in relation to the previous topic, because if you look at the 8 principles that were there, security was only mentioned once. But is that right? Is that right or wrong?
Well, that's the reason for the debate, John.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Should we have that debate? I completely agree.
Yeah, it's I mean, anyone got any comments? Philip, how long have I got, Philip? Am I about done? Or
yeah, we could speaker from spec group. Good idea.
I meant no, I couldn't put all the words in because you're limited on text, but I meant the cyber specialist group. If we can get one of their players involved, that would be good. And those guys are the experts. They know exactly what they're talking about. John, that's not to undermine you, of course, but they are the guys that know their stuff, right?
Simon, I'm an expert until you ask me a question. All right. So there's absolutely no problem at all. Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. The more experts we can bring into the field, the wider that sort of debate. Jill, did you want to say something? I saw you half with your hand up.
Yeah. I'm sort of coming at it again from the other end and saying, yes, of course, educate people, get them aware and so on. Mm-hmm. But what about at the other end? What about at the almost geopolitical end? What is the threat from this? How bad could it be? And, what are the measures that governments need to be thinking of as distinct from individual? Because, I've been doing a lot of work around futures and people talking about smart cities, and you can easily see how a smart city could be closed down.
Oh, I could shut a smart city down. And that's not being immodest. That's just because I know the way they're building smart cities at the moment.
That's right. I mean, they're all out of the same rule book, out of the Chinese recipe, aren't they?
Yes.
And so it's frightening. And I was wondering about, maybe some thinking about not necessarily scare stories, but, based on existing major hacks that have had, the effect of closing down chains of supermarkets for a few days at a time, closing down health systems for days at a time, trying to actually raise the profile of it. Because, people talk about it's a disaster when a bridge breaks. Well, it's much more of a disaster when a software system breaks. How
do you think
to turn it round, as it were?
Sean Sadler, I've got your message. Thank you very much. I just wanted to point that out so that we're aware that Sean's there. In response to your point, we've never. People say we've never had a cyber 9/11, right? That would have raised the awareness to bring it up. Personally, I think we have. I think there's lots of incidences that have been raised as that are attributed to other things that are not publicly out there. But I'd be very interested to looking at this in a topic in relation to the conference from a critical national infrastructure level, from a business perspective level, from an end user level, and feed all those back together. So Jill, if you want to get involved from that level, I'd be delighted to have someone of your caliber, involved.
I think it's important. Yeah,
I do too.
Yeah.
And don't forget to bring that name badge with you. The one the guy left in the machine. Could you bring that one with me, please?
Yep. Good message.
And
Right,
I think with that, I'm going to have to say, John, that was a brilliant discussion. Thanks ever so much for leading it.
No
But in order to give John Hall a little bit of time to run through his topic, I'm probably going to have to move us on, I'm afraid.
Can I just ask, are you capturing these emails and stuff and all that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm capturing everything that people are putting in the chat, and if people
Brilliant.
are sending me things on AHA, yes, I'll be capturing that as well.
All right. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you all at the conference. It's a great pleasure. Thank
you, John. That was brilliant. And following on from John, we have another John, Dr. John Hall, whose topic tonight to talk us about is something that I think we've all come across, which is the difficulty in getting the right resources through and into the industry. And John, I'll hand over to you. Please feel free to take us through this one.
Thanks, Phil. I'm John Hall. Really good to see you all here tonight. It's a warm night here in Milton Keynes. I don't know how it is at your end, but I've got the fan on, so if there's any background noise, please forgive that. I do need it on. It's hot in this room. My name's John Hall. I'm from the Open University. I'm an ex-chair of the IT Leaders Forum, what used to be called ELITE. I lecture researcher at the Open University. I'm a director, company secretary, advisory board member of certain organizations, and write a regular column for BCS IT Now on leadership. I'm also the co-founder of Poetics, which is an exciting Open University spin-off that's looking to change the way we change. And this tonight is all about change, the change that we face in the industry. I don't know about you, but I watch way too much Olympics and Paralympics. It's probably the same for all of you. Really caught up in the achievements of Team GB. We, as we always do in the Olympics, or increasingly as we've done in the Olympics over the past few times, we punched massively above our weight, with the amazing achievement of finishing fourth in the ordinary Olympics and second in the Paralympics. What makes it more incredible is that there are only continent countries, or the host, Japan, above us. Absolutely amazing. So it's clear that for the games, the UK got the right people into the right place at the right time. But as you know, as a country, we're never satisfied. So between now and Paris 2024, we'll be looking to Team GB to search for those athletes with the best potential, to identify their improvement needs, and to give them the opportunity to approach the superhuman levels of skill, enterprise, and effort that is needed to be an Olympic athlete. Of course, the Team GB's job is made much more difficult in that resources are scarce, so that any investment must be highly focused. But things change slowly, or they change in an evolutionary manner in sport, so that who could say that we won't do even better in Paris 2024? Unlike the Olympics, in industry, identifying the best is not down to any single Team DB. It's down to your organization and the others that power our economy. Your organization competes on the world stage, and it's up to your organization to find those new technologies, the new thinking and the new blood that gives them a business advantage over their rivals. They're going to have to do that by themselves as well. Nobody's going to help them. Without exception, the area that currently drives the economy, and I dare say for a few years yet, is digital. Digital is where the services, the products, and so the values are all located. David and John have talked about this already, but digital is also where the challenges exist. Security is a massive challenge. Think of us as being in the same situation as when printing first came onto the scene, working out what printing, what new modes of delivery printing would give us, what new things you could do with printing, and we're still at that early formative stage. To cope with it, it's going to be the digital technology and the digital ideas from our industry that will attract the digital funding that our industry needs to progress. It's our industry, IT, where the tech-savvy businesses leadership is most needed. But it's also IT, which the whole of the country, all organizations throughout the country need. And that's your area and your domain. So you're going to respond to this, as you always do, by preparing your organization for an aggressive digital future. It's that simple. That's your role. That's what you do. That's your raison d'etre for being in the industry. And for this reason, the future success of the UK economy is down to you as an IT leader. But I know some of you, I know you have broad shoulders and I know you can take this. But how precisely are you going to do that? What support do you need and where should it come from to lead? I think it comes down to attracting the right next generation of professionals into the industry. But to know what the right next generation of professionals are, let's first think about the future needs of digital organizations. So I want to bring you to a guy called Larry Bossidy. He was born in 1935 in March and was CEO for Honeywell in the 1990s. You might not know Larry, but you might know one of his sayings. He said, "I'm convinced that nothing we do is more important than hiring and developing people. At the end of the day, you bet on people, not on strategies." Now, Larry was really old time. The world in which Larry earned his CEO stripes was very different to the one we live in today. I'd say that in Larry's time, and that continues into the current time in most organizations, organizational leadership was really the management of complexity. Managers build complex organizations based on complex operations to succeed in a complex business context. It's no secret that the key to managing complexity is upfront planning. And because of this, planners were what an organization needed at all levels to complete successfully. And so it were planners and people who could develop and implement and work to a plan that we wanted to attract into industry. Don't get me wrong, some of my best friends are planners. Some of them are highly qualified. I love planners. Planners are great. Planners do some of the best stuff in organizations. And this is a massive problem that we as a profession have to change. To a greater or lesser extent, our whole education and training system is there to develop the planner in the workforce. So we learn the mathematics of this and the science of the other. Very little scope for the social sciences, very little scope for the arts. And I think that is a real problem. It's not like complexity is going to go away. We're always going to need planners, but it's not all that there is. The startup I mentioned earlier, we just finished a research project with organizations in the UK and Germany into the challenges that organizations face today in their business context. And it turns out the challenges, as you know, the challenge is no longer just complexity. Today's complexity tangles with something that organizations are still learning how to handle, something that can so easily question the organization's existence, even on a daily basis, something that can kill an organization's strategy, destroy its planning, disrupt its operations, and disappear its market overnight. John McCarthy, you'll be saying, yep, that's IT security. Of course it is. Anybody in technology innovation will say, yep, technology is changing so quickly. That's what he's talking about. And I'm talking about all those things, but I'm talking about more. I'm going to group them together. I'm going to talk about volatility. Volatility is the tendency of things to change. David mentioned change in his introduction, and it is a driver for everything that happens in IT. We all know about change, even if we might not like it. But the disturbing fact is that there's not only change, but change is increasing. The rate of volatility is increasing. And that's exposing organizations to new existence-threatening risks. I think IT has a solution, and I'll get onto that in a little bit. But I want to talk first about 3 dimensions of volatility that we've uncovered on the Poetics, and these are technical, social, and knowledge. So what's technical volatility? That's the tendency of technology to change. David mentioned this earlier in his talk. Of course, technology changes. The increase in production and adoption of new and highly disruptive technologies, the things I'm talking about, the Internet of Things, digital, artificial intelligence, machine learning, they often involve far-reaching transformational changes, not only in the products and services, but at all levels within an organization, impacting not only the technical aspect of it and its products, but also disrupting culture, business models, business processes, the workforce. Everything to do with an organization is affected by these things. It's technical volatility that killed Blockbuster. Really interesting, really nice program on Netflix you can watch about the last Blockbuster store. I recommend that to you. But the point is that by encompassing the digital, Netflix responded to the change in a better way than Blockbuster and rose from what were possibly the same fire. It's technical volatility in microchip technology that originally brought Apple low, and then now has made it the most valuable company ever. It's now over $2.5 trillion in value, market capitalization. The increasing rate of change in cybersecurity, the viruses, the Trojans, the ransomware, the social engineering attacks means that organizations are exposed to massive risks with law enforcement unable to keep up. Massively important topic that John was talking about. Technology is smartphones over flip phones, and now with I think Samsung's just bringing back the flip phone, so flip phones come back over smart flip phones, I guess you call them, laptops over desktops, and electric over fossil fuels. We all hope for that. So that's technical volatility. Social volatility is different. Social volatility is tomorrow's norms and expectations of the customer base compared to what they have today. Social volatility makes whole markets disappear, sometimes literally overnight. And as people change to a new fashion, it's MySpace over Friends Reunited and Facebook over MySpace. It's Google over Yahoo, Microsoft over IBM, Tesla over Ford, and Apple over Motorola. Third type of volatility is knowledge volatility, and the decreasing ability of organizations to keep ahead of the changes. Knowledge volatility is doubly disruptive because the things you need to know to manage technical and social volatility each have their own increasing rates of change. Keeping up with knowledge volatility is that new programming language that you need to learn, or somebody in your organization needs to learn. It's the new training that somebody needs to take. It's that new trend that you need to understand. And there are only so many hours in the day to be able to do that. At some point, knowledge volatility moves an organization beyond the ability of any single person to manage and any single strategy to cope. In fact, it's so bad that fully 50% of projects designed to keep up to change delivered late, exceeded their planned budget before completion, or addressed a reduced scope, while 20%, a whole 20%, put the existence of their company at risk. So if we were to group those together, we would see that 70% of change projects fail. Moreover, and I'm getting to the point where IT comes in, our industry comes in, moreover, and really worrying for me, there's a lack of experience at board level and throughout the organization in dealing with any of these volatility factors. And if it wasn't sufficiently disruptive, it's something that breaks the tried and trusted methods by which an organization deals with complexity. With volatility, all that upfront planning ceases to work. With volatility, going up the hierarchy to a decision maker and then down again is too slow. None of this stuff works. We need to be more agile. We need to be more adaptive. Volatility is both a source of problems and raises many opportunities for our industry. One problem, my first problem I talk about, is the problem that exists within the organization. I mentioned earlier how our whole educational system, most organizations, are based on the management of complexity. Well, the current systems we have for hiring depend so much on attracting the planner to the organization. IT is embedded in the larger organization, and that larger organization doesn't yet face the same pressures that we do. Their leadership still works in worlds characterized by complexity. So the timescales they work on are slower. Their processes are plan-driven. They're trapped in a complex but not volatile world. They don't get exposed to volatility. They expect us to react to volatility. Another problem, second problem, is the lack of awareness and the lack of digital awareness of the board, which means they want planners, not adaptability, and they don't like local decision making. Their dependence is on the creation of strategies that are already out of date by the time the organization starts implementing. Another question is with the education and training system, which will and continue to produce planners for the foreseeable future, unless we can get in there and change it. And the last question in this section is how to keep tabs on the volatile environment. How does your organization listen? What does active listening mean for an organization? And here's a question for later. Which other problems do you see? Great debate around this, I think. On to the opportunities for our industry. Well, IT is the adaptable profession. There is no more industry more adaptable than IT. If there is an industry that can cope, it is the IT industry. We've grown up with volatility. We've grown up with change. We know how to deal with it to certain extents. Second opportunity is that if we can attract them to IT, the next generation workforce has grown up to understand digital and to understand change. Access to them is mediated. Unfortunately, access to the next generation is mediated by generations that aren't digital savvy and don't understand change. And some of those, unfortunately, are in BCS. Third opportunity is that we do have the solutions, if only we could understand the problems that face the rest of organizations. And the third opportunity, and this is the real thing that I think is going to keep us going forever, is that this problem is never going to go away. The IT profession is the new baseline for industry operations. It is our worldview, the worldview of the IT industry, our knowledge and our understanding that defines the digital organization. So another question, which opportunities do you see for us? So to finish, let me say that I'm not arguing that strategy and planning are dead. They are necessary to manage complexity, and complexity isn't going away at all. It's just that the balance between managing complexity and managing volatility is quickly moving to a balance point beyond which strategy and planning are the be-all and end-all of everything. And with that, I'll open the floor to people.
Thanks, John. So same approach as before. If you want to unmute, turn your videos on now that we can make that work. Please go ahead, feel free, let's have a discussion about it. I am conscious we are over the time that we'd originally said, but I'd like us to keep going and run this one for at least another, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. If everybody's happy for that, then please feel free to engage. You can either ask questions on AHA, through the Zoom questions, or just talk to us with an unmuted mic. Thanks.
So who's going to be first? Hi, Jill. You've unmuted. Have you got a question or a comment or a observation?
Yes. I mean, talking about, you know, the balance between complexity and volatility and strategic planning, I think one of the best approaches to planning I've ever heard was Eisenhower, who said that a plan is useless, but the process of planning is essential, if I can paraphrase. And I think that organizations, especially even in times of volatility, do need to do the processes of planning, of thinking about what might happen, as well as taking on board complexity. And that's not to say that they then have to set a plan in concrete, but the thinking processes are shown to engage brain cells that allow people to observe changes on the horizon. And so I think, you have to be careful how you say strategic planning is dead.
It's the commitment to something monolithic which is dead, I think, Jill.
Oh,
the
yeah.
processes are really, really
Monolithic
important.
is dead. Of course it is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it stopped being a board activity about 8 years ago, I think, in my perception. And strategic planning started to be pushed down first to divisional level. And then there were all sorts of these attempts to engage, managers, teams, and so on in strategy. And I think, at the moment, most organizations are pretty much in a mess when it comes to strategic planning. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be encouraged to start trying to.
Well, you can also see that as a response to complexity as well. As the organization gets bigger and the top of the organization gets distanced from the bottom of the organization, the strategy has to percolate down. But my point is that strategic, the commitment to strategy, the commitment to something which is going to last for 5 years, even a year, is too much now. We need to get back, put iteration into strategy and get that thinking unafraid to restart at the top again. When a change comes, go back to the beginning and start thinking again. So we're never going to get to the point where we can commit to something monolithic for the future.
That's true.
And but I think IT, we have techniques, we know what iteration is. We don't yet know how to manage it. We don't know how to build the right hybrid processes, which are the right balance between plan-driven and iterative, adaptive, to get us to the point that we need to be. But we're the only industry that's thinking about this seriously. And I think this would be a great place for the BCS to be, in that to move away from the focus of the IT industry on programming and those sorts of skills, and onto the process issues, onto the issues that get people communicating, onto the issues that get people talking to each other, and on the issues that get people iterating and out of that mindset of having to reach the end of something before you start again. I think that's a really valuable role BCS could play.
Sorry, I was on mute. It's interesting, isn't it, how what David was talking about earlier, and what you've just been talking about, John, how much they join up and kind of start to question how we should be, whether or not the methods we're currently using are the right methods, and what do we think should be the kind of curbs along the road that we should be thinking about. And then what you're talking about, John, which is what are the skills and what are the approaches that we should use, and make sure that we're thinking a little more, let's call it outside the box. But what we're doing is we're moving the box, is actually what we're doing into an area where I think the technology industry has a strength, but at the moment we need to lead other parts of industry along that to get them to engage with what we can bring, I believe.
Yeah. We need to engage more throughout the organization. We need to engage with the board in particular to get them to the point where they understand what they're facing. We need a digital revolution in organizations that will just fit them for the future, fit them for what is turning out to be an aggressive digital future. Look at an organization like John Lewis, really struggling with their place in the market, really not understanding where they want to go, how they're going to get there, and that's a function of being able to manage complexity, but not being able to manage volatility.
Do you have? There's an interesting thing here. Do you have what you might call exemplar organisations, John, that say, actually, this organisation I think is approaching it well, and this other organisation isn't? And I absolutely get you might not want to name the organisations, but at least if we know there are good examples and bad examples, and possibly how can we reach out to find out what they're doing and actually build on their knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious large examples. Netflix, for instance, has really started a new business model. But even that was based on smaller players' business models that just didn't make the grade for other reasons. But I think if you look around in the brokerage markets, where small organizations are putting people together digitally, are removing the real third person, the real intermediate in a relationship, and replacing it with a digital intermediate. That has so many benefits. It removes negative agendas. It puts people in touch. It makes it much more easy for people with needs to get in touch with people that provide solutions. So there are loads of examples around there. One is one I'm particularly amazed of is an organization called Global Bridge. And they're doing something that BCS could have done, which is to revolutionize the way that school children and future potential employees talk to each other. They understand the importance of the formal qualification. They really do understand the advantage of the formal qualifications, but they also understand in industries that need adaptability. They understand the role that those extracurricular activities, the fact that somebody's been involved in the theatre, the fact that somebody's written music, the fact that somebody's done art, the fact that there's this creative aspect to a person as well, which isn't necessarily reflected in their paper qualifications. These sorts of organizations are the source of revolution. We're 10 years away from a revolution. BCS should be driving that. We should be driving that. IT Leaders Forum should be driving that. And so this makes it critical for us to understand the great things that people at this meeting are doing inside their organization to cope with the changes that they face.
Yeah, I get that. The sharing point's really important. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sharing and role models, isn't it? It's so important.
Yeah.
People having an image of what success looks like, because quite often the people who make things happen in organization are not the people on the paper hierarchy. It's somebody else who goes, we need to do something, but they need a good role model that they can persuade their managers to go and look at and learn from. And so role models, absolutely.
Very good, yeah. And I'd even say that leadership in these organizations is not necessarily located at the top.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a leader. This is what our school children need to know. You can be a leader wherever you are within an organization. With the right skills, you can do that. So I think this is a challenge of leadership as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware that we've gone on till 8:15. I really appreciate people hanging around to comment. It's been really valuable for me. And perhaps we'll get a chance to discuss this at next year's IT Leaders Conference.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if people think that this is a sort of topic we want to discuss, or I mean, given the discussion we've had here on any of these three topics, if there is a demand for us to have a non-conference event, maybe leading to a slightly wider debate, or bringing a couple of external people in to get other views, again, let me know, because it's that we build the events program on. I think this and the other two topics that we've heard about today could very well be good candidates for conference. But I'd like your opinion if you agree, or more importantly, if you disagree.
Well, I have to go for a run now. Pitch black outside. I'm going to put my head torch on so I can see where I'm going. And Phil, it's been great.
I am impressed. Wow.
It's been great to be a part of this.
So I guess the last couple of things that I want to say is, if you want to be involved in this, please let me know. If you should be able to find my contact details on the IT Leaders Forum site. If not, then I don't know, you can see bcsitleaders@gmail.com on the screen there. Use that will get through to all of us on the committee. We'll be able to respond to that. The other thing is, this has just been three topics. If you've got ideas about other topics that you'd like to see discussed, then we'd really love to hear that as well. We are building a program for the conference, so there's plenty of opportunity for us to start to build something in, but there's also plenty of opportunity for us to start thinking of other events, and also those events leading to maybe white papers or a bit more lobbying in the BCS or external to the BCS to actually get these ideas thought through. And that's kind of building on one of the things John just said, which is actually the BCS should be leading some of this, and maybe us as a group within the BCS should be challenging them to take a lead and maybe feeding them with what that leadership looks like. And with that, I'll just say, is there anybody else got any more comments? Otherwise, I'm going to close the meeting, and by just saying thank you ever so much for everybody that's been involved. I've thoroughly enjoyed it tonight.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Everybody.